The following is a presentation of Second City Works, delivered by your earbuds at WGN+.
Welcome to Second City Works, Getting to Yes And. I'm Kelly Leonard, creative advisor for the Second City. We are brought to you by Second City Works, which is the B2B arm of the world-famous Second City Theater. You can find us at secondcityworks.com. And this is more than just a podcast. It's about getting to the yes and moment in your work and your life. The term yes and is a key pillar of improvisation. It's at the front end of creativity. It's about building on ideas and making discoveries together. This is Getting to Yes And.
Working all day for a mean little man with a clip-on tie and a rub-on tan. He's got me running around the office like a dog around a track. But when I get back home, you're always there to rub my back.
When I was in college, I got the bug in freshman year because I was cast in the improv group.
Right.
And then we had Sharon Halpern in this group, Frank Booth, that had Liz Allen and Kevin Mullaney and Brian Boland and a bunch of other actors.
Big improv
They,
performers of the time.
They came and did these workshops with us, and it really sort of imprinted in my brain in that very that impressionable moment in your life where you're 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And
Are you like a sophomore or junior?
I was a freshman.
You're a freshman. Oh wow.
Yeah, it was everything to
Okay.
me. And then we, my next year we made a pilgrimage to Chicago and we saw everything at Annoyance and Second City and I.O. and I saw Paradigm Lost, and to this day I have an autographed program from Tina and Rachel and Dorf.
1998.
Yeah, and that was the best sketch comedy show I'd ever seen, and I think to this day is the best sketch comedy show I ever have seen, arguably maybe neck and neck with probably two shows, Dratch and Faye, who were in that show, and then Saigon Suicide Squad, which is the UCB's breakout show.
Yes.
I thought was an incredible sketch comedy show.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Paradigm Lost, and you've probably heard this before, which is it wouldn't have happened without the show Pinata Full of Bees, which was
with John Glazer, right?
John Glazer was in that, and Adam McKay.
Adam McKay, yeah.
And the thing about that was that show, Pinata Full of Bees, blew the doors open. It was messy. There was no set. It wasn't elegant. And the thing about Paradigm Lost was it was incredibly elegant.
Oh, it was, and that's what stuck with me.
Yes.
When I saw Paradigm Lost, I always tell Rachel Dratch this when I see her in New York. She came to my show, Thank God for Jokes, recently, and I always say to her, that show changed my idea of what sketch comedy could be. I thought, oh, it's theater.
Yep.
You can make sketch comedy at the level of Long Day's Journey and Tonight.
Right, yes. So this is perfect, because my first question for you about your film, which I loved, Don't Think Twice, was, this is what I thought many things watching it. And to the point of Paradigm wouldn't have happened without Pinata, and Pinata was kind of a mess and uncomfortable.
And legendary, by
and
the
legendary.
way. People talk about it all the time.
That so much around improvisation is learning to live in discomfort and play in the muck, right? That's the thing that we unlock in people, like, no, it's okay to play around, make mistakes, fail, all that crap. So I'm watching your film, and that, of course, comes through. And then I realize, oh, wait, for improvisers, they get home and it's just as uncomfortable. Their apartments are small. They have shitty jobs. They don't get paid anything.
Yeah.
And it really sort of struck me that, I don't know what social science is being had here, but that there is something to the fact that you are playing around with people who are really searching in an art form where success usually means you're real big and everything else means you aren't.
Yes. No, and I always try to say, I'm traveling around the country right now with, with Liz Allen, and we're teaching these improv workshops at, here in Chicago at Second City and I.O., and then in other cities, at Improv Boston and the Philadelphia Improv Theater and Washington Improv Theater, and Liz teaches improv. I'm not an improv teacher. I play one in the movie, but it's not what I do. But I try to explain what the tenets of improv have taught me to do directing film and acting in film and writing. And what I try to say to people is that one of my things that improv has taught me to do is everything.
Right.
It is fearlessness, is there are no mistakes, is this idea of, and I feel like I was very lucky to learn that when I was 19,
right,
before I had the fear of the world in my face, and just to go, I can do anything, and then cut to extreme failure,
yes,
and then
right.
but then you're like, well, I'm going to try again. You just don't know any better. But there's something to that. I try to say to these small improv theaters, here in Phoenix or San Francisco or Seattle, you guys can make things that are, the most, to paraphrase, I think Paul Sills from Something Wonderful Right Away, the best written, best performed, most topical theater in the world tonight. And that power is not to be taken lightly.
And you, for your career, because you didn't really stay as an improv artist, right? I mean,
no, it's not. It's not my primary focus.
No, and so I think I became aware of your work probably through Ira Glass's program,
sure,
This American Life, and then your shows, which were essentially solo art pieces.
Solo pieces, yeah.
So
Sleepwalk with Me, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, and then Thank God for Jokes is a recent one, yeah.
So I'm curious too, because obviously for doing the film, you had to start improvising a bunch again.
Yes.
So, as an artist, how does that differently feed you? Because as a solo artist, it's a very singular expression, and when you're in an ensemble, you have to give up a ton of control.
Extraordinary amount, and that's why I do it.
It's two different muscles, right? Though, I mean, it's like
yes.
system A, system B thinking.
Yes, it is, and that's why I do it. I do improv because there is no control, and no preparation, and there's no. There's a degree to which you can get out of your head. I think I do it for the same reason that people skydive or go skiing. This idea of if I don't focus on the moment, I'll fall down or I'll die.
Right.
And so I got back to improv after Sleepwalk with Me, the movie, partly because they asked me to do something at the Del Close Marathon at UCB, and I thought, it's interesting they asked me this because I have been, I realized that improv principles really taught me how to direct film, and I was sort of yearning to do improv again. And when I started doing it, I thought, I love this. And I hadn't come up with the movie idea yet. And so I started doing this regular Wednesday show at the UCB in New York. And at a certain point, my wife made this observation where she goes, she came and it was like, I think on that given night, it was like Adie Bryant, who you had at the Second City, Ellie Kemper, and Tammy and Chris from the movie, and Tammy from Second City, of course. And my wife said, it's fascinating to watch this group because it's everyone is sort of equally talented, equally funny, and yet this person's a movie star, this person is on SNL, this person lives on an air mattress in Queens, and I just thought, not only is that a great observation, but it's a movie. Like I could picture this sort of Big Chill style movie set in the world of improv comedy, because I just thought, like, what if there's a movie about how life isn't fair?
Yes.
like why not? Why not make that movie? No one else is making that movie.
No, and it's so core to truth, which is also where comedy plays, right?
Yes.
So I mean, my wife is a comedy professor, and people always ask her, "Can you make someone funny?" And she goes, "That's the wrong question, because comedy is the thing that's in between the audience and the performer. If you're telling a joke in a room with no one, is it funny if no one's laughing?"
Right.
And so I think that's what's highly unique about both improvisation and the comedy art form is it's transactional. Unlike drama, and that is actually relatively new thinking, that there's not a lot of writing on that.
Right.
Everyone's like looking for the source code of comedy. I don't know if you knew this, did you read any of these books like a year ago that all came out? The Humor Code and
I never read that.
They're all trying to find the one thing that says what comedy
Can there
is.
be a comedy robot, basically?
And Comedy Gene. It was funny, I was talking to the people at IBM who made Winston. Because we were talking about to teach him to improvise, and the guy goes, "Oh, robots are terrible improvisers."
Oh, that's hilarious.
It was like without a beat.
Robots are terrible improvisers.
Yeah. So when they take over the world, they won't take over.
They'll be humorless about it.
Right. Well, and we'll still have the improv theaters.
That's all.
I'm trying to look for
the revolution starts here.
Yes.
Yeah. We're the guys in the Matrix.
Yes.
Who are the revolutionaries.
Improvisers are going to battle the robots.
Yeah. Oh,
Next
God.
movie.
Yeah.
You can take this a whole other way.
But it's and it's funny how it's that life isn't fair principle is really sort of. I wrote this thing on my wall when I was writing the movie. I wrote, "Art is socialism, but life is capitalism." And it's never spoken in the movie because it'd be too on the nose.
Yep.
It was in certain drafts, and it was nobody says that.
Right. So
but it was a guiding principle.
And the movie is a written movie.
It's very written.
This is what I love too. I mean, I imagine some of the improvised moments are improvised moments.
Of course. You want. I feel like what you want to do, and I'm sure you guys have this at Second City, is you want to write something to a point where it completely works on its own, and then leave a little room for like kicking the tripod.
Yeah.
Sort of like what else can happen in the quiet moments.
Right. But I don't think you would. The art of the movie. And it's very artful, and it's also it's a sad movie.
Sad, yeah.
That would not have come through if it was purely improvised. I don't think.
No, I don't think so. I think improv is, in a lot of ways, I think Second City is my favorite place to witness sort of the results of great improvisation.
You
use it to craft something that is meant to be immortalized in some way or kept for posterity. And I think that, that's my favorite use of improv.
Right. Well, it's nuance.
Yes.
I think improv is what's in the cracks and nuance, which is all the rich, great stuff that, when applied onto a mapped, beautiful story from a storyteller, makes for the greatest stuff. I remember my parents coming to see the first long-form improv show I produced, which was called Lois Kaz, which was like every great, Dorff, McKay, but tons of great people. And they didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this part of long-form improvisation is like avant-garde jazz.
It is.
To regular theater goers. Because they went to tons of plays.
I'll tell you though, now it's becoming very mainstream.
Yeah, it is
when
now.
I got out of college, it was like, well, I can move to Chicago or New York or Los Angeles, and now it's like, there's 120 improv theaters in America.
Yeah.
When I cast out my Facebook post saying like I'm going to come around and do workshops, there's 120 submissions.
Wow.
It's a whole different game.
Well, I think also part of that is how improvisation has entered everything.
Yes.
So whether it's
in TV commercials or
and health and wellness, and
you're
education and school. That's where it started. It was a social worker, Viola Spolin, inventing games to assimilate kids.
That's right.
And that's the most of the work that I'm involved in right now is working with behavioral scientists and others to look at collecting data on improvisational practices. So what can we learn?
I think that's phenomenal.
Well, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a baby art form.
Yeah, it's a baby art form, and I think it's so many of the principles of improv are things that we could all stand to do more. Saying yes and collaborating, and as TJ and Dave say in their book, listen more than you talk.
Mm-hmm. And so, the things like self-regulation, right? So you teach these kids, and they use games to help teach these kids and measure kids on their ability to shift and change and not eat too much, drink when you're supposed to, not cry at anything.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just was on this webinar about it, and then I realized I'm like, oh, that's when we go and bring our workshops to businesses. We're essentially there to get people not to cry at their performance review.
Oh, that's interesting.
And which is self-regulation.
No, and I like that because I think that failure is an essential ingredient to success.
Right.
And I think that it's in this culture often underestimated that
makes it shameful.
It makes it shameful. And in fact, I feel like one of the luckiest qualities that I have in my life is this ability to forget the failure and then try again.
No, that's great.
And then improv sort of reinforced that
Yeah.
when I was 18 or 19 learning it.
Yeah.
And that idea of like, no, just try again.
And that that doesn't exist in most places.
No, not at all.
And it's a shame because it like when the rapid prototyping, right, in business.
Yeah.
Rewrites.
Yes.
Like editing process. Huge throwing away in every other business. But then you get into like regular day-to-day life, going to your job, and it's like, you can't fail.
Yes.
I was using an analogy about a baseball player. Like if I went to my boss and said, I'm going to fail 70% of the time,
Yeah.
I'm going to get fired. If I'm a Major League Baseball player,
Yeah.
I'm hitting 300.
No, I know, of course.
It's
And
crazy.
and they say, a lot of great business minds say, when you have an idea, get it to market and then figure out how it works.
Right. Well, the technology now has figured that out, right? They
Yes.
play with stuff in public a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean,
So I think it's changing.
Twitter is like that.
Yeah, Twitter's like
Facebook
that.
is like that. All these companies, Uber, all these companies are getting to market and then going, okay, how do we perfect this?
Yeah.
Which is of course what I did when I made this film. It's like I threw up a pass of the script because I had it in my brain, like, and then it was like, okay, now how do I refine this? How do I make the characters distinct from each other?
Right.
And it's, one of the things I do is when I write, I noticed that I was procrastinating writing the script, and so, but that I was showing up to meetings and lunch appointments with people on time and always making it. And so I put a note next to my bed that said, Mike, ! You have a meeting at 7 a.m. at Cafe Pedlar with your mind. and I would do it.
Yeah.
Should go to at 7 a.m. and I would write for 3 hours, turn off the internet, turn off everything. And I always encourage this to writers, is I would write before I was afraid of the world.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Almost when you're not even awake.
Yep.
Before you have any inhibitions.
A friend of mine who works at IDEO, the design firm, he's on this quest for creativity, and he said that Thomas Edison sort of believed that the source of creativity was in between consciousness and unconsciousness.
I think so.
So he used to do
That's
a thing.
I'm glad to know that.
Well, he did. So you can try this experiment. He would, when he'd go to take a nap, he'd do it in a chair with spoons and then a tin pan. And the minute that he'd fall asleep, that release, it would wake him up, and he'd go right down with it in his mind.
No way.
Yes.
Well, I'm writing that down.
Yep. I mean, it's very hard to nap in a chair.
In other words, when he was sleepy, he would sit there on a chair with spoons in his hand, and the moment the spoon would fall, the sound would wake him up,
Yes.
and he'd jump to and they start writing. That is incredible, and that's my next movie. You just told me how to write my next movie.
Great. So to that point, he had told that story at a TEDx that we were both talking at in Rochester, Minnesota, and then I had to fly to New York to do. We were doing a lecture workshop. I'm not a teacher either, so I do the lecture part, and then great teachers.
Right.
Yeah. So we're in the same game on that.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the night in New York, and this is for Broadway producers and marketers, I sort of rang myself out of bed, and I wrote down these things, and the next day I just read them. I'm like, I have not even looked at this again.
Yeah.
I told them the story about the spoons, which everyone loves, and I think, and I'm not remembering it verbatim, but the idea was if we really want to change the world, we need to get poor people to vote. If we really want to change the world, we have to make businesses incorporate failure and all this stuff. And then at the end of it, I go, or we can just get people to stop being assholes at work. Can we try that? And the place went nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so, and I think that's an improv thing, because I don't think you can be an asshole in the improv moment, but you can be an asshole outside the improv moment, which is what happens over and over in your film.
Yes. In other words, you have to agree on stage, but off stage is when things can get tenser.
We forget that we have to agree off stage, and then our asshole behaviors come through. And if there's some way to maintain the improv spirit off stage, I mean, it would make for a very boring movie, so don't do it artistically.
Well, no. I mean, I had drafts of the film where Ira Glass would say, it's Mike. I'm sorry. It's not a movie. I'd say why? And he'd go, because there's not enough conflict. And I realized early drafts that they were agreeing with each other too much.
Yes. Yeah.
And in some ways they were the same person. That's a group mind kind of phenomenon.
Right.
I'm sure you've had groups over the years where it's almost like talking to one person.
Yes. Yeah. And though I've had way more groups like this one, where when they get on stage, they're all good.
Yeah.
But when they get off stage, for example, your character is past his time.
Yeah.
Is living with this very false memory that he almost made it.
Yeah.
the Keegan character.
Very false memory. I love how you read that into that.
It is. And then the Keegan character, which by the way is a little like Keegan, who was always the biggest person in the room and kind of couldn't help it.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, when
he's such a big personality, he was really a team captain on set.
Yeah, well, you can hear his laugh. Like,
yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's like, he's here.
Yeah.
And all the characters had these sort of archetypes drawn. Yeah. From and Tammy, which is funny because Tammy being stoned all the time was just very hilarious to me.
Yes.
Because my experience of Tammy, of course, is she was such a UFC egghead.
Sure.
When she was
big
here.
Math nerd.
Big math nerd. Yeah, did scenes on math where she actually solved a math problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Just ridiculous. But I do think that it made for a more interesting movie that you could see and play with all the flaws. But I also believe quite strongly, I think you do too, that at its core, if you can remember this improv stuff when things are getting bad, that's the best place to apply it.
I think you're right.
And that is an oxymoron for people because they probably think, hey, if something's risky or failure, the last thing you want to do is improvise.
You know, it's funny because there's this great podcast called Script Notes for any aspiring screenwriters. It's John August and Craig Mazin, who are very accomplished screenwriters, and they do this free podcast. They don't make a dime on it. And there's a ton of wisdom. There's 250 episodes. And one of the things that they say is, if you sit down and write exclusively for 3 hours a day, you are ahead of 99% of screenwriters in America.
Yeah,
you have to just do it. And that really goes back to so many improv principles of just go.
I was doing some research yesterday I'm doing a podcast with an ethics professor. And I found a thing online about ethics and improvisation. It was written by Sam Wells, who's the vicar of St. Martin's in the Fields. Wow. And he talks about ethics and religion in a religion setting. But his theory is that with ethics, you really can't just say it. It's not a knowledge exchange. That you need to have competence and confidence to use ethics. And the only way you develop competence and confidence is by doing.
Yeah.
And he came to the understanding that that's improvisation, so that you should be teaching ethics purely by improvisation.
I like that.
It was really, I thought, and I think he's right. How else do you get competence and confidence?
Well, one of the things I think is great about the boom of improv in America right now is that, unlike classes in stand-up comedy, for example, which I've never been a huge fan of, improv teaches principles that are universally good for community.
Yep.
And so I think if someone becomes, like in this movie, people who become great improvisers, and maybe that's not what they're going to do professionally in their life, but maybe they're going to be a great dad, maybe they're going to be a great husband, maybe they're going to be the head of the PTA and have a good collaborative spirit. And I think that that's good too. It's like, I feel like one of the frustrating things I find about this culture is that we deem success to be visibility. And I don't think it is visibility. I think it is affecting people and connecting with people and moving people. And that's why I always say when I speak to the improv groups around the country, is like, you have the ability to perform for 30 people and change the trajectory of their day. I mean, they are watching all these shootings on the news and are despondent, and they come in and they didn't think they were going to laugh today, and they laugh, and that's a gift. And you just gave that to them.
Amen.
Well, I've been working in a coal mine, going down, working in a coal mine, about to slip down, working in a coal mine, going down, working in a coal mine, about to slip down.
This is Second City Works, Getting to Yes And. You can find us at WGNplus.com. You can stream us on the WGN Plus app, or you can find us on iTunes. See you next week.